When it comes to EQing vocals, this is a really heavy subject. But something that can happen to you, and definitely happens to me often, is that you can get lost in the process of EQing vocals. So while you're EQing your vocals, you get a little bit lost. And when that happens, it can lead to not such a great result, or it could leave you worse off than you would have been without EQ at all. So how do we make sure that this doesn't happen? How do we make sure that we're getting the most out of our EQ process? Let's talk about it. If you're new around here, hi, my name is Chesky Ifra from Y&I Recording Academy. If you're not new around here, thank you so much for coming back. Today, I'm going to be showing you a few different guidelines that I like to keep to and stick to while I'm EQing my vocal. Now, keep in mind, I said guidelines for a reason. These are not rules, these are guidelines, so just keep that in mind. Number one guideline is to avoid EQing in solo. Try to EQ in the context of your mix. If you EQ your vocal in solo, a lot of times the moves that you are doing sound good in solo, but then you put it into the track and not necessarily do those moves complement the rest of the mix. So this is why you should always try to EQ in solo. Now, this doesn't mean that hitting the solo button every now and then is wrong. I definitely encourage to hit the solo button to see, just to get the context and just see where everything is. But working primarily in solo is where the danger is. So I would say work primarily within the mix. If you need to flip back to solo every now and then for a couple seconds, that's okay. Now, keep in mind, this works the other way around also. If you do your EQ within the track, in the context of the track, a lot of times when you hit the solo button, it might not sound as good as if you would have just EQ'd it in solo from scratch, and that's okay because you EQ'd in the context of the mix. So don't get scared if you solo your vocal and it sounds a little bit thin or a little bit bright or a little bit too muddy or whatever it is. As long as you did it in the context of the mix and it sounds good, you're good to go. Let me show you what I mean by this. I EQ'd this vocal in the context of the mix. Now, if I solo it, I'm going to play it in the context of the mix, and then I'll solo the vocal.
And as they wrap those neshamois close with their holy arms, the very arms inflicted with pain, as we observe the jabs, healing wounds and scabs, we tear up, can this really be? They'll tell you shechoy lazavoni.
So this is the EQ that I ended up with, and I'm happy with the way it's sounding. If you could see what my EQ moves is actually really simple, just pretty broad moves on this vocalist and this setup over here. But now I'm going to play it in solo, and I'm going to bypass the EQ, and then I'm going to unbypass it. I'm going to enable it as I'm playing, and you'll see that the vocal loses some thickness and some body to it. And this is okay because these moves that I did in context of the mix, and I felt like it was getting in the way of the rest of the context of the mix. So here's what it sounds like.
And as they wrap those neshamois close with their holy arms, the very arms inflicted with pain, as we observe the jabs, healing wounds and scabs, we tear up, can this...
Now, if I was EQing in solo, I might have not gotten to this result, most likely would not have gotten to this result, because I would have been EQing for it to sound good in solo and not for it to sound good in the context of the mix. Number 2 guideline is the don't overdo it rule. The don't overdo it rule works like this. This is my don't overdo it rule for really anything, but especially if you're starting, even if you're advanced. Obviously, EQ is meant to be pretty drastic sometimes, and again, this is just a guideline. But if you tend to feel like you're overdoing some things, if you tend to feel like you're overdoing the EQ, this is my guideline. Do the move that you're going to do and push it up until your ears can audibly hear the move clearly. Once you get to that place, back off the effect a little bit. So how would this look in practice? In practice, let's say I was dealing with this 3K cut right here. I'm gonna work in solo just for the purpose of the demonstration. Obviously, if you're EQing, you should EQ in the context of the mix, hence guideline number 1. But just to show you what's going on here, I'm gonna be doing it in solo. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna listen to the vocal and bring down this 3K cut as I'm listening to the vocal until I can really audibly hear it. And then I'm going to back it off a little bit. And that is how I ensure that I'm not overdoing it and I'm not like just looking for very obvious changes, because a lot of times when you're starting out, or even intermediates, you're looking for very obvious changes. And very obvious changes usually means that you did a drastic move. Now, if the drastic move was intentional, that's great. But if it's unintentionally drastic just because you want to hear it, that's probably not such a great thing. So this is how you can ensure that you don't overdo it. So I'm going to play the vocal.
And as they wrap those neshamois close with their holy arms, the very arms inflicted with pain.
So all I did was dragged it down till I felt that I actually heard the move very audibly, and then I backed it off a little bit. Now, obviously, if you bypass if you bypass this move, you're definitely going to hear before and after, but it's not so noticeably poking out at you.
And as they wrap those neshamois close with their holy arms,
it's definitely there, but I didn't overdo it because I adhered to this guideline of the don't overdo it guideline. So just basically push it till you hear it and then back it down a little bit. Number 3 guideline is blind test. Do a blind test with your EQ. Now, how in the world do you do a blind test? So what I like to do when I'm done my EQ in the context of the mix and I didn't overdo it, I adhered to the guideline number 1 and number 2, I'm done with my EQ. I want to see if 2 things. First of all, did I make a difference in my EQ? Can I tell the difference? And second of all, this difference, if I did make a difference, does it sound better or worse off than when I was not, than if I didn't have EQ on at all? So how do you do this? By the way, this is a great exercise in general. Again, you could apply this to not just EQ, but it's especially useful by EQ. But what I do is I close my eyes and I press the bypass button with my mouse a bunch of times. Okay? And if my eyes are closed, I can't tell if it's bypassed or unbypassed. I can't keep track of how many times I click the mouse. Then I'll play the track with the space bar while my eyes are still closed. And I'll play it, and then I'll just click the mouse. So it'll either unbypass or bypass, and I'm not sure which one. I'll do that a few times, and I'll determine which one I think was the EQ'd version and which one I think is the non-EQ'd version. But more importantly, I'm asking myself, which version do I like better? So this is how the blind test works. I'm going to leave it unbypassed. I'm going to close my eyes, click it a bunch of times, and press and play the track.
and as they wrap those neshamois close with their holy arms, the very arms inflicted with pain.
So I like this version better, and I'm really hoping that it is the EQ version. Yes, it is the EQ version, and that is how you can ensure that you're making all the right moves and you're getting the most out of your EQ. So these are the 3 guidelines that are going to help make sure you get the most out of your EQ every single time. Let me know down below which guideline is your favorite, and more importantly, let me know if you have even a 4th or 5th guideline that you like to follow while you're EQing your vocals to ensure that you get the right results from your EQ every single time. That's all I have for now. Till next time.